I don't know, everybody comments that pastors are always sitting in front of books. So,
well, you know, man, in this day and age, there's so many ways to consume content. Most people say things like, I'm an Audible guy, I'm a podcast guy, a YouTube guy, and I'm still an old-fashioned book guy. There's nothing like the written word on the printed page, and I can hold a paperback or a hardcover in my hand. Like, I'll use Kindle for stuff I can't easily access, but
yeah.
I love books, man.
Yeah. Kindle's awfully tempting when you want that book now, and it's just like, bang, it's right there.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Well, TK, thanks for being on my channel. And I learned about you on Twitter a couple days ago.
Yeah.
Kind of the height of the drama. I've listened to Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter for a long time, and I mentioned them on Twitter, and someone said, you got to listen to TK Coleman too. And I thought, I'd never heard of you. So, and then messaged you and, why don't you come on my channel so I can meet you and get to know you? And you graciously did. So I don't know how many of the people who watch my channel know anything about you. So let's start with you. And then you can ask big questions about me because you don't know me either, but let's start with you. So,
yeah. So first of all, you mentioned John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry. I've spent a lot of hours listening to those guys, especially McWhorter. I mean, what a brilliant thinker, what a great philosopher of our times. Yeah. And he's had a lot of interesting things to say about language, about culture, about race, that I think is worth anybody's time listening to. I think one of the great tragedies of our age is we only expose ourselves to thinkers that reinforce what we already believe and feel. And it's so great to go outside of your familiar spaces and just engage great minds, because learning how to think more effectively is just as valuable as, hearing another way to explain what you already think you know. And McWhorter is one of those guys where on a lot of things politically, I differ from him, but every single time I listen to him, I absolutely enjoy the experience, and I walk away feeling like my IQ is a little higher.
Yeah.
So shout out to both of those guys. And I would love someday to be able to talk to Glenn and John on race and be a part of that conversation. A little bit about me to answer your question.
Well, more than a little bit. We've got time. And on my channel, I do a lot of conversations, as they say on my channel, with randos. And just today, I've had conversations with two guys that, that I don't know in meat space and regular space. I have an open channel on my line, basically, that if anybody wants to talk to me, if they can find a slot, they can just sign up and we'll have a conversation. And often I post them. So we're used to, my channel loves people's stories. So tell me about growing up and who your parents were and what growing up was like for you. And we'll start there and we'll take it from there.
Yeah. So I'm the baby boy of a family of 5 in Chicago, and my dad is a pastor. So I am TK the PK. I grew up in the church. My pop's church was a Pentecostal all-black church on the west side, inner city Chicago. Initially started off as one of those like storefront churches, and is now a much larger church on a major intersection in Chicago, Washington and Cicero. And I grew up with a couple of fundamental assumptions that have remained with me throughout my life. The first is you are here for a purpose, and your number one job is to discern what that is, and to embark on a journey of always refining and upgrading your understanding of what that is, so that you can make a difference in the world according to God's calling on your life. And all of the fulfillment that we chase in status, in things, in money, all of that's gravy on the mashed potatoes, man. But the purpose, the reason for your existence, that is really what it's all about. I remember hearing Dr. Miles Monroe once say that the root of man's frustrations is his misconception of self. When we don't know who we are and why we are here, how we have each been called individually to be the image and likeness of God on the earth and to represent some aspect of his kingdom, nothing else can satisfy you, And so I was taught that very early on. The second thing that was drilled into us is the understanding that work is distinct from a job. And ideally, you want to figure out a way to marriage the two if you can, but you never want to limit your understanding of work to a job. No matter how much you might hate your job or be bored by your job, your work is your opportunity to give creative expression to the divine. It's through the brilliance of humanity that we give glory to God. Work is one of the primary means by which we worship. And so I've always prioritized those two things. Like anybody that grew up in the church, you know, my journey, it was not a linear one. You had a lot of little deviations from the path, but as the scriptures say, raise up a child in the way that he should go. When he's older, he will not depart from it. I think that's true of me, albeit in a roundabout way. So, you know, when you grew up in the church, especially in like a Black Pentecostal church, it's like everybody's an extension of your family. I've got aunts and cousins and uncles that have no, you know, blood relation to me, but they look out for me. We look out for them. It's like family. I grew up in a context where I was often in the car with my pop or you know, at a restaurant with my pop and other preachers. And I have a very positive image of older men in my life who really looked out for my brothers and I, and sowed the seeds of moral reasoning, sowed the seeds of spiritual philosophy into our hearts. And I was just always taught to take those things seriously, which doesn't mean you can't have a sense of humor about yourself as you contemplate those things. So that's how I grew up. I would say when you know, in high school, I fell in love with theater. I went to college on a theater scholarship, and I grew up in a really conservative home. Not politically, but culturally speaking. I can get into kind of like the political environment in a moment, but culturally very conservative. We didn't listen to secular music. We weren't allowed to go to the movies. And man, if it wasn't explicitly about Jesus, it wasn't happening in our home. It just wasn't happening. You know, my mom just had preachers like Moody Bible Radio playing 24/7. It just wasn't going down in the Coleman house if it wasn't the Bible. Like, you brought a book in the home, it's like, how many scriptures in that book? You know, it was no joke. And so when I got to college, I mean, I'm exposed to an unprecedented amount of cultural diversity, of religious diversity, philosophical diversity. And it sent me into a kind of crisis of faith, if you will. And, you know, a lot of the questions that my friends would ask became my own. I remember plugging into some communities like Intervarsity Christian Fellowship, Campus Crusade for Christ. And one of the things that they were doing at that time is they would go out on the campus and they would minister to people. And I would see these atheists and skeptics ask questions. And I remember being really unsatisfied with the answers that were being given. And I felt like I was relating more to the questions than the quality of the answers. And those questions became internalized. And so I remember this pivotal summer. I'm at home. I've got a brother who is going to Trinity at this time, and he's now a pastor, but he used to always keep great books in his room, and I would always find good reading material. And I remember he had this stack of articles on his desk, and they were from Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. And the name of the articles were called Just Thinking. And the one on top said The Logic of Sesame Street. And I read that and I was like, whoa, that particular article wasn't written by Ravi. It was somebody in his camp. But then the next one was by Ravi. And I couldn't stop, man. And I kept reading everything. And when I finished, I felt like these scales had fallen off my eyes. And I said, whatever you call this, this is where I want to be. And so I remember going back to school. I had been a theater major up to that point. And I go back to school and I go straight to the philosophy department because I'm thinking, I got to be in an environment where I can be at home asking questions and nobody will be intimidated or annoyed by my doubts. Because not to throw believers under the bus, but at least 20 years ago, you go around asking apologetic questions. The culture was very different now. Like, apologetics has gone mainstream, but then people would be like, be careful with those questions, right? And the philosophy department represented a space where I could go, and whether my teacher was atheist or a theist, they were just happy to talk about it. And so I go up to the chairman and I said, I want to major in philosophy. He says, have you taken any classes? And I said, no, but you know, I'm good. I'm ready to do this. And he says, well, usually people want to kind of take a course first, see if they like it, and then they study it. You know, declaring a major is a big thing. And I said, no. I read the Ravi Zacharias articles. I know this is what I want to do. And he let me do it, man. He let me study philosophy. There was a man in that department, Dr. Timothy McGrew, who became a good friend and a mentor of mine. I wish I talked to him more, but Tim McGrew is just like a ridiculously great philosopher who also happened to be a Christian and was just a great source of conversation in my life and helping me shape my worldview and so forth. And I can go on, but I've already talked too much.
No, you haven't. Trust me. I have a channel where I talk for hours all about myself. So don't worry about that. And if I want to redirect you, I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey. I have no problem butting in and redirecting you. Don't worry about that. So you're doing great. So what school did you go to?
Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Kalamazoo, Michigan. Yeah. So I went to Calvin College in Grand Rapids. So
okay. Oh yeah, small world.
Yeah, it's a small world.
But my wife is from the Grand Rapids area. Yep.
Okay. So you went to Western Michigan. You got a philosophy degree. What happened after college?
Man, you know the hardest part about telling this story is everything I tell you, there's like 5 or different choose your own adventure paths.
Yeah.
That gives you a completely different picture of my life.
That's
and I'm
no
like,
problem.
oh gosh, which path do I want to go down? Because it's not a linear journey at all. It's not a linear journey at all.
Well, we're sitting here and you graduate college, we'll find our way from one point to the other. So keep going.
Yeah.
You're obviously, let me tell you a little bit about myself. So that might help you.
Yeah, that'll help.
So, oh gosh, see, I have the same problem. So I'm a third generation.
It's tough knowing where to start.
Yeah, I'm a third generation minister in the Christian Reformed Church. Now, being from Kalamazoo, Michigan, you probably have an idea what the Christian Reformed Church is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
Absolutely.
Western Michigan, you bump into the Christian Reformed Church in Chicago, Western Michigan, not so much other places of the country. Because my mother's family came over with the cows to Massachusetts, that they're Frisians. Don't worry about that. But my father's side of the family were Jews who went to Western Michigan and mingled in with the Dutch Reformed towards the end of the 19th century. So then my grandfather became a minister in the Christian Reformed Church and ministered throughout the Midwest, mostly with my father growing up. My father was his eldest son. And then my father went to Calvin College, because that's what you did if you were Christian Reformed. Went to Calvin College and eventually to Calvin Seminary. And then after seminary, he had met my mother in college, and she was from the East Coast, and he had two in the CRC, we call them calls, basically 2 job offers. One was from Northern Alberta and the other from Paterson, New Jersey. And so this is 1959, 1960. Now, you've read The Warmth of Other Suns?
I haven't.
Oh, you should. It's an amazing book. It's basically about the African-American migration up from the Deep South out to New York, Chicago, LA. Must-read book. It's a phenomenal book. And
say the name of it one more time.
The Warmth of Other Suns.
Okay, got it.
And I read that book about 3-4 years ago, and because of the story I'm about to tell you, suddenly big pieces of my life made sense, because I grew up in Paterson. And of course, when you grow up into something, you don't know it's weird because it's all you know. And I grew up, and my father was pastoring this church, which was mostly full of Black folks from the poor area of Paterson, New Jersey. But I obviously wasn't Black. But I didn't know that, because you just grow up thinking you're what you are with who you are. And so then we went to day school with all the CRC folks in their Christian school, but then we lived, and church life was all amongst the Black folks in Paterson. Well, a whole bunch of stuff. So that was my growing up years. And so I was always sort of straddled 2 communities. And then I went to Calvin College, and I went to Calvin Seminary, and I became a missionary in the Dominican Republic. Did that. I never wanted to be a local pastor. Then we left the Dominican Republic, and it's like, what am I going to do? And I could pastor. I know how to do that. I watched. So then I came to Sacramento, California. I've been here for 22 years, and it's a very diverse congregation. in the East, we called it inner city, but in California, it's always the rings, because California cities grow by these rings. And so this area of town was one of the first places after redlining where Black folks could buy houses. And so this congregation was started about the same time my father's congregation was started, and that was sort of second wave anti-racism. And Dr. King was very much the leader of the movement, and it was very much integration, where you'd have, my father got there sort of before that consciousness, and it had been in the 50s kind of the CRC, the white Dutch CRC churches had moved out of Paterson because they were in, the suburbanization effect. But some of them were like, a lot of these people living here, they're struggling, they're suffering. We can't just, what certainly we owe our neighbors something. And so then they had one of these old style gospel mission, giving away food and all this kind of stuff. And they did that for a decade or two. Then it's like, this should really be a church and not this dependent thing. So they called my father, who, when I think about it, knew nothing about Black folks, to Paterson, and he stayed there for 36 years. And so that was me growing up in this church, which was, it was weird, because on one hand, it was sort of Dutch Calvinist, because that was my father, but most of the folks were Black. And so it was always an alternative. It was an alternative to the Black church, because there were plenty of those churches around if folks wanted to go to it. And so for the Black folks, it was an alternative. And for the white folks, well, there were plenty of those churches they could go to, but they wanted this vision of integration and living together and becoming one body. And so that was, but of course, when you grow up in it, it's just like, isn't everything like this? And of course, later on, you learn that it isn't. So anyway, so that's what I've done for most of my life. But then Jordan Peterson came along, and I've always been interested in things. And I was interested in the stuff that was going on around Jordan Peterson, not so much the political stuff, much more the religious stuff, because I saw people becoming interested in Christianity when I had seen so many people become sort of New Age or atheist or something like that and not come back. And then in Jordan Peterson's wake, people started coming back. And I made a couple of videos commenting on Jordan Peterson's work, and suddenly I had people watching my YouTube channel, which wasn't happening before. So, and that's how the YouTube channel started. And so all of this stuff. And of course so I was very much raised, and again, what we'll use John McWhorter's language, second wave anti-racism, Dr. King. That was it. So then I'm watching some of this stuff develop, and it didn't start so much with the racial reconciliation conversations. It came about more with the gender stuff. And I began listening to people in my denomination talking about this, and I began to say, this is sounding like a different mode of salvation that's going on here. And so and so then, early on, I found the blogging head, the Black guys at bloggingheads.tv, Glenn Lowry, and I knew nothing about him. And I had read one book by John McWhorter, so I knew something about him. And I listened to these guys talk, and I thought, wow, I don't hear so many of the conversations I was listening to. It'd be like, and as a Calvinist, to me, thoughts like, the racism built into me and how the racism gets into systems, none of that surprised me. I didn't have, and growing up where I did, that was all easy to see. That everyone's got racism, and that racism gets into our institutions, it gets perpetuated. None of that was news to me. I thought, I get that.
Yeah.
The hard questions are, well, what then? And I wasn't finding conversations like I heard so Glenn and John sort of speak from different sides of the political equation, but they're both honest and, honest about just honest about so much, and honest to me about the Black experience. And I wasn't hearing that. And it wasn't new to me because I had lived all my life around it. And I'd seen a version of it in the Caribbean, which was very different, but still, still racism and structures and all that stuff was perpetuating between Haitians and Dominicans. And so I watch all this stuff and I'm thinking, I don't hear any except in the church. But again, I mean, part of what's happened, and see, a lot of my channel, I deal with, in a sense, the march of secularity. The Black church has, been undergoing a lot of changes too. And so finally, when I listened to Lowry and McWhorter, I thought, these are two guys I want to listen to regularly because they're being honest about what I can see is all sides of the issue, instead of, I listen to some of these people and I think these people on one hand are declaring that racism is permanent and systemic. And I say, yeah, as a Calvinist, I agree to that. And so the answer is for these white people to do things to save them. And it's like, did you hear the first part of your equation when you listen to the second? And I know that white folks have to do stuff too. I get that. But McWhorter says it the best. Why are African Americans the only people in the history of the world that somehow can't overcome a situation of adversity? And when I hear that, having grown up the way I did, and so my father's ministry, so often we had heroin was going through Paterson at the time. And so, walking through getting free of drugs with heroin addicts, and of course, a whole new level of racial conversation and consciousness was happening, and living with people as they're working through, okay, what does it mean to be Black in this country? And if you just read the well-documented writings of the civil rights movement, there are multiple voices working on these issues. And now people like, I'm not going to read a book, I think this, and bang. It's like, no, read, learn, get in touch with you. So anyway, you got me preaching. I'm so sorry. I talk too long. No, you see what I mean about long speeches? So you keep
man, this is good stuff.
Shut up more.
No, this is good stuff. There's a lot of good conversational fodder here. So one thing I want to say about the whole thing of the solution, I think I don't know how you worded it, but it was something along the lines of like, oh, just like apologize or something like that. I don't know what it was, but one of the things that it makes me think about is this idea that when you get redemption wrong, you also get repentance wrong. When you don't have clear ideas about what it means to be redeemed, then you can't have good ideas about what it means to repent. So one example of this that we see in the scriptures is, when the Pharisees bring the adulteress to Jesus, right? And they said, hey, look, the law says she should be stoned to death. And they were very illogical in their thinking, you could argue. And by the way, she was not, the highest member of society. She's certainly no one we should be holding up, as any kind of, beacon of meaning, and yet we do. We talk about this adulteress because she's a very important symbol of something very special and near to God's heart. But Jesus challenges them, right? He challenges them. And, in that challenge, we understand the real nature of their error, because these guys didn't understand grace, because they didn't understand what the message of redemption was all about. They couldn't get repentance right. Their idea of how we fixed, they diagnosed the sin problem. They were right about that. A law has been violated. No criticism of them there. But their concept of redemption was the right thing to do about this is to stone her to death. And the reason they thought that was a good idea was because they were completely disconnected from God's ideas, from God's vision of what he ultimately wanted to do with not only this adulteress, but with every human heart, right? And that's the difference between the Christian worldview and the world. You know, the world is a cancel culture. Christianity is a compassion culture. And those are two totally different ends. In the world, the reason we call you out on your sin is because, first of all, it's really fun to do so. Secondly, it gives you a lot of power, right? There's nothing more powerful than the sensation of pulling somebody down. But also, you know, when our anger is heightened as a result of seeing something done wrong, it kind of feels satiating to call you out and to cancel you. And now you're done, and I can move on to whoever and whatever else needs to be canceled. And I understand that. I'm very empathetic towards that, and I don't intend to mock it. But we have to be honest about the fact that that is a different aim than the Christian worldview. And you can disagree with the Christian worldview. You can say, well, you know what? I'll accept that as an argument that your worldview is foolish. And that would be understandable too. But the Christian worldview says God's ultimate end for every human being is not to cancel them because of their sin, but to redeem them. Can you imagine if the Apostle Paul, who was the chief of all sinners, was canceled? If anybody deserved to be canceled, it was him, right? But the purpose of rebuke, the purpose of calling someone out on their sin, is because you understand all men have sinned, all people have sinned, and fallen short of the glory of God. It's the glory that we have fallen short of that makes sin such a tragedy. We were meant for glory. We were meant to be these beautiful, brilliant, shining lights so that people might see our good works and glorify our Father in heaven. And as long as the clock is ticking, as long as we are alive, there's room for that. You know, and if we have an opportunity to bring someone into the fold who has a powerful testimony like Paul saying, I was the chief of all sinners, but now I'm laying down my life for the message of the gospel, that's awesome. That's a major victory for the world, right? But we fall short of that because we don't understand Jesus's message. And we see it illustrated in the Pharisees with the adulteress, and we also see it illustrated in discussions today on politics and race. We don't understand the message of redemption. And so we don't get repentance right. And we actually lose a lot of people by representing the gospel as if it demands a form of repentance that not only doesn't satisfy, but that actually doesn't really lead to transformation either, you know? Yeah. That's something. There was something else you said that triggered me too, but I forgot what that was.
This could be a long video. I love it.
Yeah.
Wow. So, all right. So you didn't leave college and become a preacher, even though you obviously have the gifts. What happened? What are you doing?
Oh man, I'm fully sold on the idea that life itself is ministry, and that all of us have individual networks, and that constitutes the mission field. And our job is to represent that light in everything we do. But in terms of what I do now,
well, we got to get, I don't want you to go there yet. I want to, because people in my channel, a lot of people who watch my channel are young, and they're trying to sort themselves out and figure out. So hearing other people's stories about how they get places, it's really helpful. So you left college, and then what?
Oh yeah, sure. So, okay. So I graduated college, and here I am with a philosophy degree, which certainly is not.
Well, you almost had a theater degree. That's maybe just a little better.
I don't know, man. Like, is it better to think successfully or act? Man, who knows? Anyway, but so I have this bachelor's degree in philosophy. That's not making the top of anyone's list for most economically rewarding degrees, right? And you know, there's certainly a path ahead where if you want to go on and get a PhD and maybe be a professor, but that wasn't on my radar. I had a number of different dreams and so forth. And as I'm new into the real world, I'm really thinking about money, and I'm really trying to figure out, how am I going to be a self-sustaining adult? Like, you know, this is a big question that I got to answer. And so another story about being at home in my brother's library. This is my other brother. I have a lot of moments of transformation that have taken place in my brother's libraries, which is a case for having the power of having people in your family that read. You never know the impact you'll have. So there was a book he had called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And I remember reading that book, and there was something about the case that Kiyosaki made for the relationship between financial literacy and a meaningful life. And he presented money not as this thing to be feared, not as something that is intrinsically evil, but something that is a neutral tool that can be used for good, that can be used for bad, depending on how you understand it. The way I like to put it is I like to say, the love of money is the root of all evil, but a wise and understanding of its nature and purpose is the beginning of much good. I came away with that kind of conviction after reading Robert Kiyosaki. And there was an elder at a church I attended at that time who was a financial advisor. And, I was all hyped up with a bunch of questions about finance that, I asked him if we could do breakfast, and I would pick his brain and ask him questions. We did that. It was a great time. He recommended some books for me to read. I went and I inhaled those books, and I was like, can we do another breakfast? I got more questions. We did that for about 3 or 4 rounds. And he was like, hey man, you got a knack for this stuff. You're inhaling a lot of these books. You're really intense. You're really interested. Have you considered doing a career in finance? And I was like, that sounds good, because in my mind at this stage, I'm still thinking that the way to make money is to learn a lot about it. I'm still being a philosopher with it.
Yeah.
And so through some connections of his, I ended up becoming a financial advisor at American Express. And I did that for about a year. And during that time, I learned a lot about sales. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about how to work with clients. And I've got nothing negative to say about the time that I worked there. But I worked hard. I worked long hours. I'm in my cubicle every day. And there's something about being in that space that really caused a lot of old dreams to well up in my heart. And as the early 20-somethings tend to do, I started to freak out that I'm going to wake up one day and be like Rip Van Winkle. My whole life will have passed me by. I'm going to all of a sudden be 80, and I'll be filled with regret. I'll regret having made money and been successful, but I won't have followed any dreams. And that's just hilarious to me, by the way. Like, there's nothing that young people fear more than like making a bunch of money, being successful, and being filled with regret. I like to remind them, oh, believe me, the odds that you will have so much success and money, first of all, I don't even know if that's happening, right? Like, you have no idea how hard it is just to get to that point where you can have that as a regret.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was my fear. And something that I didn't mention is, when I left the theater as a major, I still had friends in that department. I would still sometimes do plays. I would still stage manage a play or act in a play. And I still had a love for that world. And I just didn't graduate with a degree in it. And I would still do some things in my free time. And a dream that I had, to be honest with myself, that I had always had, was to give myself a chance to work in the film business. And I just love storytelling, man. That was my heart. I still love storytelling. And I decided, you know what? If I stay here, I'm going to get stuck. I know people are treating me well and things are going well, but I got one shot to just be able to up and move across the country and do whatever I want to do without answering to anybody. I don't have to have a conversation with my wife, with kids, any of that stuff. And I did it, man. It was pretty spontaneous, but
hey, that's exactly the time to do it. You did exactly right.
But I had so many people mad at me. Here's a race element I'll bring into it. So we're talking almost 20 years ago. And to be a young Black male working for a company like American Express, and to have a label financial advisor, to walk into the office with a suit and tie every day, that's a pretty big deal, right? It's a lot more common now. It'd still be a big deal right now.
Yeah.
But that was a real big deal then.
Yeah.
And I even remember this time, there was a maintenance guy who worked in that building. And sometimes I'd be there working late. It's like 7:30, and he would be coming in doing his cleaning. And I had seen him a few times, and we had given each other the head nod. But there was one day he came up to me and he was like, "Hey, bro, it's good to see you in here, bro." And I could see his eyes water up. He was like, "It's just so good to see you in here, bro."
Yeah.
And I could tell that me having this job meant something to him at a level that made him feel more hopeful about his world.
Yeah.
And I empathize with that. You know what I mean? And so when I quit, there were a lot of people in my life that were proud of me at the time that I had that job. They were proud of me. And can you imagine a black guy? Come on now, listen to me. Can you imagine a black dude who was able to get a job as a financial advisor at American Express? He not only quits the job, but to be an actor. The only thing worse was for me to quit to say I want to go to the NBA. You know what I mean? I mean, you couldn't have picked the worst thing to do, right? It's like, come on, man. Like, we have proven we can do that, TK. We've done the basketball thing. We've done that. And that's what I want to do. That was so disappointing, man. I really hurt a lot of people. I won't go deep into that, but I had a lot of people being mad at me. And so that was really tough for me. That was a really tough experience, man.
To be perfectly honest, if you were my kid wanting to do that, you know, I wouldn't stop you, but I'd say, I'll see you in 6 months when you're crying at me because you need a bailout. But yeah, go do your young foolishness. So anyway, I'm glad you did it. Keep going. You're doing great.
My father's one of my best friends in the world, but Pops, if you're watching this, I know you're celebrating when he said that. I know you're like, see?
Hey, my kids are in their 20s. I know it'd be like,
yeah, right. I put my parents through, man. I put them through. but so yeah, I mean, I actually, so here's the funny thing. I didn't expect that kind of pushback. I really didn't expect it. I had a very romantic image in my mind that this would be like that moment you see in the Hollywood movies where someone has an epiphany while they're sitting in their cubicle and they're like, my soul is dying. I'm going to live a life of meaning and passion. And then everyone's like, yeah, man, go follow your dreams. And then you get an Oscar by the next 12 months. It was completely opposite of that. The pushback I got was hard. Even the girl I was dating at that time was freaking out. Like, what are you doing? It was bad, man. and it really intimidated me. I thought I was going to quit and just like go to Cali and do my thing, but it really intimidated me. I tried to maintain a strong face at that time, but secretly, privately, I was so intimidated. And I played it safe. I didn't have the guts to just go and do what I wanted to do. Because sometimes it's like this. I think failure, people fear failure, but I think there's something that people fear more than that. It's not failure that people fear as much as being alone when it comes time to own the consequences of failure. That's what people fear. So if everybody supports what I do and they all co-sign it and say it's a great idea, if I go do that and I fail, that's disappointing, but not too bad, because I've got a support network of people that are ready to tell me like, hey man, you know, not everything works in life. You did the best that you can, you know, good job. We love you. Now you move on to something different. But when you make choices that cause everybody to be concerned and people to think you're crazy for making that choice, then that means the pressure to succeed is much higher. Because if you fail, you don't have a support network of people that are going to be like, it's all good. You're going to have a network of people that are just waiting to be like, I told you so. I told you so. Just like you mentioned with like, yeah, okay, I let you do it, but wait till you come crying at me in 6 months. Wait till you come crying at me. But if I do something that you suggest and I still need your help in 6 months, you're going to feel a sense of like, hey, you know, I invest in the future. I'm happy to support you. And I felt that pressure. And so it wasn't so much that I was afraid of failure, but like I was afraid of that pressure. And it took me a while. I didn't go off. I didn't go. I ended up getting a job at an assisted living facility that I had spent some time working in while I was in college, because since I quit my job, I needed to find a way to pay the bills. And I'm just kind of in what's the word for it when you're in the I forget the word for it. You know, whatever, no man's land, I'll call it. But I was kind of like floating there. And you know, as I'm working there, I decide, you know, I think I'm going to go back to school and do philosophy. I think I'm going to go to graduate school. Yeah. I was working at this place for like a year and a half. And through a combination of just comfort, fear, that dream that made me quit that job just kind of, settled down somewhere into my soul. And I knew that what I was doing was an in the meantime, in between time. I've always had it in my DNA to do something that was meaningful.
Yeah.
I still knew that philosophy was something I was called to do. And it just seemed more reasonable to me and more accessible to me to go back to school and study philosophy. So there's this amazing, miraculous story I'm going to skip over when it comes to that. But I ended up going back to school, and I'm in graduate school for philosophy.
Where?
I'm on back Western Michigan, same
okay.
thing I was in. Yep. And I'm on a Thurgood Marshall scholarship for philosophy there, and everything seems to be. It seems like okay, my life is starting to make sense again. The adults in my life feel like I'm being a serious professional again. It's like okay, he had the American Express thing, but he's studying philosophy. He's doing cool. And so I'm about almost a year in. One of my buddies who lives in LA, he's a working actor. He played the character Uturn on Weeds. He's been in a number of movies, number of TV shows. His name is Paige Kennedy. And him and I actually were in theater together. And we hung out a lot when we were in college. He calls me one day. And what I didn't tell you is I sang as well. But you can usually assume that with theater people, Yeah. So anyway, he calls me one day and he's like, hey, man, you know that show American Idol? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, they're actually having auditions, right? And I just feel like if you went to audition for this thing and other people saw what I saw, I think they love you, man. And I think you'd have a shot at being the next American Idol. And he says, I think you should come out here and do this. And I go, nah, man, nah. Not interested, right? I'm on a stable path. I'm doing well. Can't afford to break anybody's hearts anymore. I'm good. So he calls me back. No, I'm sorry. He told me the first version of this. He told me that it was in like in Detroit or something like that, which wasn't far from where I was in Kalamazoo.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. So he calls me back again, like 2 weeks later or something. I'm probably getting my time mixed up, but he says, hey, listen, they're doing another round in Chicago. I'm serious. I think you really got to do this. And I'm like, nah, man. He hits me up again a little bit later and says, look, they're doing this in San Jose. I've been talking with Marcus about this, who's another friend. And he says, Marcus and I both agree that this is what you need to be doing. And so we decided we're going to pay for you to fly out here. You can stay with us. And the seeds of doubt begin to sow. And there are all those dreams that I never really figured out what I was going to do with. I hadn't made a definitive decision to abandon them, hadn't made a definitive decision to embrace them. And the seeds of doubt started to come up. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm confused again. It's like that girl you date where it's like, your mom says, no, don't date that girl. But you're like, I'm confused, Mom. I'm confused. Am I in love? Or am I stupid? And so I remember, asking, my philosophy professors about it, a few of them that I was close to. And they gave me the answer that I probably would have given myself if I were to be talking to my 20-year-old self. It was basically like, man, look, you're on a good path right now. You got a lot of potential with philosophy. You know what I mean? Like, and this is a good thing. You can have a big impact on people with this. And you're doing good, man. Just focus, and it's not like you're going to be 50 when you graduate. If you got other things that you want to do, you still can. But getting a PhD is pretty hard. It takes a lot of focus. And it becomes harder to come back to and do that kind of stuff later on. Just focus. You're in a good position. You got a full ride. Focus. And I remember, so the hall that the name of the building was Dunbar, where all the philosophy professors were. And, I walked down the long hall, towards the stairs to go back home that day. And there was a philosophy professor. I believe she was the only female in the department. I could be wrong on that. Her name was Sylvia Culp. that door was always closed. I never met her before. I knew that she was a philosophy professor, never had any of her classes, never even saw her in person. But on this particular day, that door was open and Sylvia Culp, Professor Culp, was there sitting in her chair. And I was like, one more perspective. Let's get one more perspective. And I don't think I was conscious of this at the time, but as I look back on it, I was hoping that someone would say something different to me in order to give me permission to do what I was looking for an excuse to do. And so I knock on the door. I introduce myself to Dr. Culp, say, I've never taken your class. I'm in the grad department here, but I'd love to get your perspective on something I'm wrestling with. She's like, yeah, have a seat. And we started to talk. And she says to me, there are a lot of philosophers out there, but the last thing the world needs is one more philosopher that's going to be working with future generations and talking with them about the good life when that philosopher doesn't even know what it means to be honest with themselves about their own dreams. The most interesting thinkers are the people that are willing to take risk. They're the people that are willing to go get answers to their own existential questions. You can't be a great thinker and a great educator just by reading books and studying what the other philosophers have thought. That's not what Wittgenstein did. That's not what anybody who's worth their salt did. You've got to live life. Go get your answers. If you want to come back to this when you're older, there's no expiration date on being a philosopher either. Go get your answers. And I knew that's what I needed to hear. And I made the decision to break hearts. so check it out. I had this buddy in the philosophy department, this one cat, we were really cool. And I told him, and I was like, man, I'm just going to do it. He was like, you're crazy. I was like, I'm going to do it. And he says, okay, look. He goes, you're crazy. You're out of your mind. But if you're going to do this, you got to practice and you got to be ready. He's like, you're going to blow everything. You're about to blow your scholarship. You're about to blow your social capital here, basically. He's like, so you got to be ready. He's like, this is what we're going to do. He was like, we're going to walk around campus and we're going to stop all the people that we walk into randomly. And we're going to tell them that you're going to audition for American Idol and you're going to sing for them on the spot. And he says, that's going to be scary. He says, but it's going to work your nerves because when you get in front of those judges, man, you've got to have courage. You've got to be ready, right? And we did that. Over the course of a week, we did that, and by this time I had already told my friend, I'm coming out there. I'm going to do it. I'll accept your offer. So they're excited. I have my date for when I'm going out there for the audition. And now I'm just going across campus with my buddy and we're stopping people. And one of the first people that I stopped, there's a group of these 3 tall black dudes. And I stopped them and I told them, and they gave me the look like they looked me up and down. They looked at each other, and one of the guys said, whatever, man, go and do your thing, whatever. And I sang for them, and their faces lightened up, their eyes widened, they smiled, and one of the guys said, hey, dog, you got some skill, man. And he gave me some dap. He was like, hey, do your thing, bro, do your thing, right? And I got that experience from so many people. By the time I was close to getting on that plane to go to my audition, I was so bold. I remember walking into this coffee shop on campus called Rocket Star Cafe. A lot of the students would hang out. I walked in and I stand on the table and I say, attention, everybody. I am getting ready to go audition for American Idol. And I'm just trying to work on my nerves so that by the time I get there, I'm ready to shine. I would love to sing for you. By the time I finished, it was like, yeah, let's go, let's go. I sang for them. Everybody gave me this huge applause. And I was like, destiny. I am a child of destiny.
It's like right out of a movie.
Baby. This is happening, baby. I'm about to go win American Idol. This is happening. I go out there. I could talk with you for 2 hours about the experience of being out there, what it was like, what it's like to audition for that show. I'm going to fast forward to the moment where I'm standing before producers. So one thing I got to make clear, because some people are going to be like, well, where's the video? So here's what you got to know about the audition. I can tell you so much about it. But when you audition for like the 3 celebrity judges, you know, that the auditions that you see on TV, those are auditions that you actually got to make it to. Okay. Because there are so many people who audition. There are other producers that you audition for first. Okay. And you don't make it to those judges unless you establish enough interestingness, you know, for the other producers.
That's right. It's not just talent. It's not just talent.
It's not just talent, because you can be a good singer, but you know, the entertainment industry is also about interestingness, right? You need personality. You need something that is, you know, you need style. And also, if I've got 20 people that look similar, you know, who can all, you know, do runs or sing with silky smooth voices. Okay, it's like, I've already got Boys to Men. What's different here? You know, what's unique? And so you have to have that unique element. So, and there's also two ways you can be interesting. You can be interestingly good, or you can be interestingly bad. You can be a terrible singer, but you can be worth watching, right? You can be worth watching. And so you got to be sufficiently interesting to get moved on. So my opportunity comes up, and I sing, and the way it is they point you one way if you go to that next round. And when it was at the San Jose Sharks Stadium, and you're sitting in this crowd, and it's like full, man, it's thousands of people, and you get called down in groups at a time. So when you're watching from the crowd, you see the producers do like this, and then that person has oh yeah, made it to the next round. Where you see them do like this, and that person hangs their head.
It's like the sheep and the goats.
Yeah. So I get up there, man, I do my best Boys to Men thing, and they pointed me to the exit door. I lost. I lost, man. I was not the child of destiny. I lost. You are not looking at the next American Idol. But I'll tell you, let me tell you why that was one of the most important moments in my life. First thing, when I finished auditioning, you better believe I was crushed for at least maybe a couple of weeks, especially with all that I put on the line for it. I couldn't go back to the world that I knew. But at the same time, there was this sense of intoxication that came from that. There are certain things you do in life that feel scary before you do them. But then when you do them, you're like, oh, I want more. I want more of that adrenaline rush. I want more of that challenge. I want more of the right to look back on my life and say, yeah, I did that. I already know that's going to be one interesting story to tell in 20 years. That's going to be more interesting for people to hear than what my job title is. I want more of that, right? I want to live for the interesting story to tell. That's the first thing. The second thing is, even though I took action steps that might have made it look like I was bold to an outside observer, I was scared on the inside. I was frightened the whole time. And I discovered that fear on the inside out is an entirely different experience than fear from the outside looking in. When you're looking at creative risk on the outside, it seems like your fears are just going to destroy you and embarrass you and drag you through the world, making an open show of you. But when you actually step into that fear, you realize that that experience from the inside out, it's just another challenge to face. And when you realize that it doesn't destroy you, that it doesn't really embarrass you, that nobody really cares, that even when you are embarrassed, you overcome it and you don't care, it makes you ask yourself, what else have I wanted to do that I've been afraid of? Now that I've slaved that beast of fear, do I have any other things I need to be honest with myself about? Because I'm ready, baby. I'm ready to get after that. The other thing that it made me realize is that the pearl of great price is not a dream come true, but it's the person that you get to become as a result of being true to those dreams. The real reason to pursue a dream isn't because of some Disney narrative that when you wish upon a star, it makes no difference who you are. The reason you pursue your dreams isn't because the universe gives us a guarantee that we're going to get everything that we want. The reason you pursue your dreams is because on the other side of fear, there is a version of yourself that is superior to the person you are right now in every single way. There's a version of you that's smarter than the person that you are now. There's a version of you that has a better sense of humor, that's more creative, that's more self-confident. And you don't get to be that person until you step through your fears. Because when you conceive a dream, what you just have is a vision that exists inside your head or inside your heart. But in order to pursue a dream, you have to take action steps that will lead to different ways of engaging reality. You're going to meet people along the way. You're going to make new observations. You're going to learn things about yourself and about the world. And so it's impossible to follow a dream while remaining the same person that you were when you initially conceived the dream. The mere act of pursuing a dream leaves you transformed. Like it's an alchemical process, you know? And that changed everything, man. That changed me more than any self-help book. That changed me more than any girl who dumped me. That changed me more than any class that I took, just by following that one dream. And at that point, it was like, game on, man. Game on. Like, I failed at that. What else do I want to do? I'm good with that. Like, I'm actually cool. Like, what else do I want to do? And from that point on, if I wanted to do something, I just went after it and I tried it. Some things I failed at, some things I succeeded at, and none of those things have I regretted. Because as that saying goes, the likelihood that you'll regret the things you do, far less than the likelihood you'll regret the things that you don't, given all of the prefacing fine print that we need to give about within the boundaries of what is legally, morally, blah, 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 blah. You know, so anyway, man, I could tell you about so many different things that I've done since then, and each of them can have a story just as long. But I think that story, especially to the audience of younger people that might be wrestling with what they want to do, one of the things I'll say to that is, don't treat your purpose in life as an intellectual puzzle to be resolved by navel gazing or meditating or analyzing or asking a bunch of people questions. That's only one part of seeking after the truth. But there are things that you can only know by engaging reality. And a lot of people, when they think about finding the will of God, they use the will of God as a way of hiding. They treat the will of God as if, once I find out what God wants me to do, then I'll do something that gives me guarantees. I'll do something and I can know for sure that I won't fail because God, you know, has told me this is what he wants me to do with my life. But that's not even remotely consistent with what we see in the scriptures. Think about Moses, who had the very experience that everyone would dream of. He had this burning bush experience, right? Where God is like, this is what I want you to do. Who doesn't want that, right? And then Moses walks up to Pharaoh, you know, like, hey, God told me exactly what to say to this man. In fact, I even had an objection to God when he told me what to do. And God was like, no problem, Moses. If he asks you that, you tell him this. So I'm ready, right? I go up to Pharaoh, Pharaoh, let my people go. Thus says the Lord, right? And Pharaoh says, no. Right? And the best part is the Bible says it was God who did that, right? It was God who did that. Pharaoh says, no, man, I'm not letting your people go. Moses, welcome to a story of all sorts of unpredictable things that you didn't realize that was going to happen. Welcome to a story where you're going to feel frustrated multiple times. Welcome to a story where you're going to feel like you're failing. You're still going to have questions. You're still going to have doubts. You're still going to wonder, what the heck is God doing in my life? Because having a purpose does not mean having a detailed roadmap of what's going to happen every step along the way. Having a purpose means having a relationship with God and understanding that your trust is not in your knowledge of what's going to come next, but it's in the knowledge of the context within which your life takes place. This is the meaning of Proverbs when it says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all of your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. And something that I would encourage young people to do, if you're wrestling with like finding your calling or whatever it may be, is don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid, you know, knowledge of what you don't want is just as valuable as knowledge of what you do want. You know, yeah, go get a job at McDonald's, but that's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. So what? you learn a lot about customer service. You learn a lot about work ethic. You learn a lot about things that are going to be applicable to whatever your dream is. I mean, I have so many people that tell me things like, I want to be a business owner. I don't want to be a burger flipper. And I tell them, well, if you're going to own a business, then you're going to need to be able to motivate people to actually respect you enough to work for you. And I know for me, I don't want to work for any business owner that has no concept of what it's like to pick up a broom and sweep the floor. I don't want to work for any business owner that has no concept of what it's like to relate to me and my ability to take out the garbage. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Everything that you do will help you build character, and you never have to worry about getting stuck in a job. If you're worried about getting stuck in a job, I'll say this to you. The way to get stuck isn't by doing something that you don't want to do for the rest of your life. The way to get stuck is to stop growing within that position. You can do anything and you'll eventually outgrow it if you pursue it with excellence. People make this mistake of thinking that, well, if I go all in with my job at Target, if I show up to my job at Starbucks and give it the same effort I would give to my dream, then that means I'm going to be stuck in that job forever. And it's the opposite. It's the person who resents their job and drags their feet and shows up like, oh, I hate being here, that's going to be stuck there for the rest of their life. The person who shows up with enthusiasm and performs with excellence is the person that's going to be getting job offers for every month. It's the person that the manager is going to be afraid of losing because that manager knows I got such a great employee. Every car salesman is going to be like trying to recruit this kid to go sell, Lamborghinis. That's how it works when you do what you do with pride and excellence. Anyway, I'm going to pause here.
I can listen to you all day long. I really can. Wow. You have a gift. I am mightily, you have a gift. You have a gift. Wow. I talk to a lot of people. You have a gift. And what you laid down right there, that was, you have a gift. What God will do with that gift, that's a whole nother thing. But you have a gift, and I praise God for you, and I praise God for your voice, and I am so glad. I don't even remember who on Twitter said, oh, you talked to TK Coleman. Who's that? I don't know. I talked to Randall's. I talked to this guy. No problem. I am blessed. I am deeply, deeply blessed.
Well, I appreciate you being gracious enough to reach out and be willing to connect. I'll take a quick moment to just kind of just say, because I didn't talk about what I do in the present, and I know I'm skipping a lot of steps, but
that's okay. Because now I really want to know what you're doing in the present, because it's like, wow, I'm primed. I'm all ears.
Yeah. Well, so for the past 6 years, I've worked as the education director for an apprenticeship program I co-founded called Praxis. And if you're looking it up, it's discoverpraxis.com. And the goal there was to criticize by creating. One of the things that my co-founder and I realize is that there are a lot of people who aren't interested in going to college, but they still need to know how to develop skills in order to be able to create wealth in the marketplace and have a career. And if you aren't the right fit for college, or if you don't want to go that route, all you really have is military and trade school and a few other small, niche markets. And so we wanted to sort of reinvigorate the concept of an apprenticeship, but for the white collar world. There are all sorts of things like sales, marketing, customer success, and so forth, that apprenticeships can be a viable model for. And in the startup world, they're a lot more open to the idea of not requiring a traditional credential. They're open to the idea of alternative signals. And ultimately what they want to see is just evidence that you know how to create value. They're not really concerned about a degree either way. And so we started this apprenticeship program where, we run our students through a professional boot camp. They learn about different aspects of not only job and career prep, but different aspects of value creation. And through that, we have helped launch, over 200 careers over the past several years. And I've been the education director, focused on things like coaching the participants, things like helping develop the curriculum and so forth. And where I'm situated now, my primary focus is I'm the director of entrepreneurial education for an organization called FEE. FEE stands for the Foundation for Economic Education. It's a nonprofit. It's the oldest free market think tank in the country. And FEE is devoted to popularizing things like the economic way of thinking, financial literacy, and entrepreneurial habits in college age and high school students. So a lot of what I've been doing with FEE, I've been an adjunct faculty member with FEE for about the past 5 years, and I've been teaching a lot of these things, but now my focus is centered around really helping people understand the distinction between being an entrepreneur and being entrepreneurial. Being an entrepreneur, it's, starting a business, founding a startup. Being entrepreneurial is about a way of thinking. It's about bringing a sense of artistry and creativity to whatever it is you do. And I want to help teach people how to not only apply that to their careers and to their dreams, but to their relationships, to their personal challenges in life, because it really does apply to everything when you bring these insights to the table. And so I'm focused on that, but I also have a special place in my heart to help with the building of Black communities, particularly young Black men. I believe, as you have probably seen in your experience in Black communities, the entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well in our young Black boys. It is alive and well. And there are so many aspects of the behavior of young Black boys that have been, demonized or vilified, mostly by maybe teachers that don't relate culturally. And so they translate their difficulty with handling our boys into a projection of like a lack of character in our boys. And hey, our boys are just like anybody else. Anybody can commit sin. Anybody can be difficult to deal with. There's definitely that element. But I believe
often the most difficult people to deal with are the ones with the most potential. I see that all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so there are a lot of issues in Black communities that I think are very important to address. And I think it's absolutely important that, Black entrepreneurs like myself, Black educators, Black economists, make an investment in those communities. I'm not interested in somebody passing a law to force us to do this, but it's in my heart to do it. And I want to popularize that. You take, for instance, I'll just give you one example, and maybe this pushes us in the direction of some of those, McWhorter, Laurie discussions.
Doesn't have to. This goes anywhere it goes.
Sure thing. You take the topic of mental health, and you take kind of the difference between what Black kids experience and what white kids experience. When you look at the school shootings, for instance, usually done by, young suburban white males, whenever these school shootings happen, these are without a doubt tragic events, and everybody agrees that it's a tragedy, but they're almost always correlated with a national discussion on mental health, because there's an understanding, well, rather there's a confusion over how these perfectly good suburban kids who grew up in affluent homes managed to do something so tragic. And because it's such a rare, dramatic thing, there's a collective sense of, how did we fail our young boys? How did we fail them? What did we do wrong? Why didn't we see this coming? Surely there must have been some sign of existential angst in the hearts of these young boys. What can we do better to make sure this doesn't happen again? But you also have a problem of violence in Black communities. And, when Black people kill other Black people, it's sort of like, maybe without explicitly saying it, kind of a sense of, well, that's what thugs do, right? We'll see, that's why y'all get locked up all the time. We'll see, that's why the police are in your neighborhoods all the time. See, y'all just don't know how to act. And we don't really have that same investment in conversations about mental health in Black communities. In addition to that, we have our own set of stigmas that we bring to the table, where even admitting that there's a problem with mental health, even suggesting that getting therapy, for a problem that you have, is a little bit taboo. We're kind of new at this in Black communities, and we're just learning how to warm up to it. And we don't have a long history of Black scholars devoting themselves to this, to studies in this, coming back to the communities, teaching it. We're relatively new, and so being a part of a movement that involves facilitating those conversations, supporting people that are doing the work, encouraging other people to do the work, being a sales pitch for people with talent to meet these needs. being a sales pitchman for people with talent to meet these needs. That's something that really occupies a very large place in my heart. And it's one of the reasons why, even though the topic of race relations in America has never been at the forefront of my conversation, it's never been what I've led with. It's one of the reasons why I've taken more interest in being a part of these discussions, because I think some of the most important points that are necessary for people to understand if we're going to create change are being missed, because a lot of what's talked about now is being reduced to left versus right talking points. And when your moral reasoning is limited to left versus right, and you're not thinking about it in terms of good versus evil, right versus wrong, true versus false, then there's a whole spectrum of things that you're just not going to see. And so that's one of the things that's important to me. Yeah.
Wow. I praise God for you and the work that you're doing. And I don't know anything about it except what you've told me. And I'm old enough to know that folks can talk well, but what you are telling me is just so good to hear, because yeah, I mean, my whole life I've lived and worked in communities that have been struggling with so much of this, and I so deeply appreciate, I just deeply appreciate how you laid this out, because obviously laying it out isn't sufficient. Every preacher knows that laying it out is not sufficient to seeing it happen. We know that, but laying it out is a helpful first step to at least get an idea of what we want to look for. And I mean, right away, I said, well, I got two daughters that are, I'm gonna send them to your website because they graduated college, but it's like, yeah, you girls got some education in the university, but you don't have much education in the world. And so, oh wow, we had a couple of girls started coming to the church. One was 12 and the other was 13. And the 12-year-old girl was white, and she could only come if she'd bring her friend, who was a 13-year-old girl, and she was black, and they started coming to church when they were kids. And my church has mostly older folks, and so not hardly any kids around. They started coming to church and started coming by themselves, and the church was just all grandparenting them like crazy, because so happy to see them here. And the 13-year-old girl, she was being raised by her grandmother. Her father and her uncle were both living in the house, and there were reasons why neither the father nor the mother had custody. And again, these are, and this girl, so she started coming to church, and then after a while, the 12-year-old, her friend, just kind of dropped out, but the 13-year-old kept coming, and she kept coming all the way through. And like her grandmother came once and was horrified because I mentioned Harry Potter in a sermon, and that, and so then she couldn't come for a few weeks, but she got to come back to church, and then so anyway, and so then she graduated high school, got good grades, smart, diligent. I mean, this girl, so much potential this young woman had, and we had someone in our church who was fairly well off and was having scholarships for people. So I told her, I said, look, you can go to so many schools. You can go to, I would love to help you get into a 4-year school, and really, because the situation at home wasn't great. And then she's like, no, my grandmother won't sign the FAFSA because my grandmother says, why is someone going to give you money? And it's like, because she would have gotten all the financial aid she needed.
Yeah.
And then her grandmother dies and she's 18. So it's like, okay, let's do this. And she doesn't. And I can't tell you how many stories like this I have where someone grows up and they're in a difficult circumstance, but they've made at least one or two right connections where it's like, let me help you get on a track. And there's money out there, there's scholarships out there, there's schools out there. You know, for a student like you, there is a way right now. Let me help you get in that way. And so often they, you know, maybe they got to community college, but they didn't have a mentor, and, you know, and they didn't have this, you know, and I just years and years and years of watching this. And, you know, and what's amazing to me is that, you know, at the same hand, there's some families of the church who, they're African-American families, and they've sent their kids to the best schools, and they've got all these scholarships lined up, and it's just boom, 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 boom. And they're just out in the world, and they're dramatic successes. And so it's like, you know, and so I say to the kids from, you know, from a very difficult situation, single parent household, what have you, and, you know, you know, did you see what happened with that person? You know, let me help you. Let me help you have a track that looks more like that than the track that looks more like some of these other tracks. And so I'm inspired by your vision, and I love what you said about, I mean, because I've grown. So again, I grew up in Paterson, and then I worked in the Dominican Republic. And I'll tell you, in the Caribbean, so I worked with Haitians in the Dominican Republic, and they were illegal. And the saying was, you know, a Dominican will only, it's kind of like the Americans and the Mexicans, you know, a Dominican will only work when there's no food on the table. The Haitian will work even when you know, there is food on the table, because the Haitians had this reputation of being entrepreneurs. You know, if they could just get to the Dominican Republic, and of course there's selection process. It's these Haitians that are willing to cross the border and make a life. But, you know, I saw all of this dynamism. And then, of course, I'm from the New York area. So Dominicans were coming to New York, and, you know, they were entrepreneurial, and they were pushing, and boy, they demanded their kids got an education. And they, you know, I mean, these people were on the move. And it was like, yes, I know there are obstacles in this world, but there are opportunities. And so I am again, you have simply inspired me today, and you have really encouraged me, and I am so deeply grateful for your story, and just, you know, yeah, if your parents are listening, good job, good and faithful servants, because you know, we all know our parents aren't perfect, and when you have young adult children, you know, you get to see all the ways that you failed them, because they'll tell you. But, you know,
hey, I need this. I want you to go ahead and tell my parents how good of a job they did with me. I need this. Go ahead.
I know they know the bad side too. Don't get me wrong. You're a preacher's kid. You know how to talk. I heard that right away. But, you know, and one of the things, so I got into this, I mean, I was just a anonymous small church pastor in a little dying church. And, you know, just what you said is true. I got to the point at this age, it's like, what do I got left to lose now? You know, and my career's not going anywhere, you know. And so why don't I go on the internet and make a video about Jordan Peterson, and then why don't I talk to randos, and then why don't I start meetups, and all of that's been wonderful for the last few years, and it tracks with exactly what you said about the world, and actually it tracks with exactly what Jordan Peterson was telling young people. He was saying, look, you know, you just sit there in your mother's basement covered with Cheetos dust playing video games all day. You know, yeah, you're going to be miserable. And I began to discover all of these people who were simply depressed and, you know, having this meaning crisis. And, you know, he would, Peterson's a whole nother topic, but no, you're, people who listen to my channel are going to deeply appreciate what you have to say. And I'll warn you, they're going to follow you on Twitter, and they'll probably be sending you emails, and they'll be putting things in the comment. And, but that is all good. So you have inspired me. Well, let me ask you this: how's it going?
Yeah, I mean, it's going well. You know, the harvest is always right, and the laborers are always few. So if you are involved in the work of building broken people, building broken communities, you're never at a shortage of work to do. You know, every opportunity is a problem, every problem is an opportunity, and there's a lot of work to do. And there are a lot of people out there that are willing to collaborate. There are a lot of people out there that are eager to be mentored, eager to be taught, eager to have someone, you know, show them love, eager to have someone tell them the truth about themselves in a way that heals. If I can just make a quick aside about that, a lot of times when we talk about people who tell it like it is, or people who kill it, like keep it real, imagine a person in your mind who represents that for you. And I can almost guarantee that it's someone who's willing to tell you things about yourself that hurt, even though you don't want to hear them, but they're true, right? We almost never use that for people that tell us how beautiful we are, for people that tell us how much potential that we have. And I believe that facts don't care about your feelings, but that applies to the positive and the negative. So facts don't care about your feelings. And if the fact is you're beautiful, I don't care if it makes you feel good. I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to keep it real. You know, if it builds your self-esteem and makes you feel more comfortable in your own body, I don't care that it's fluffy. I don't care that it makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. If it's true, I'm going to tell it to you. And so we got a lot of people that enjoy keeping it real as long as they get to be the person to slam dunk the truth on top of your head when it makes you feel bad. We need more people that are willing to throw that pitch right down the middle to you, you know, so that you can hit the home run that you were born to hit. There are a lot of truths that people need to be told about themselves that are very healing, not just truths that need to be heard. And I enjoy telling people the truth about themselves that needs to be healing. I mean, that has the power to be healing. And so I don't enjoy the fact, I don't take delight in the fact that the suffering in this world is the basis for that opportunity. I don't take delight in that at all. But what I do stems from not a place of guilt. It doesn't stem from a place of duty. It's not something I think I need to do in order to avoid going to hell. It's not something I think I need to do in order to convince anybody that I'm a good guy. It's something that genuinely makes me come alive. One of my favorite quotes comes from the minister and civil rights activist Howard Thurman, who said, "Ask not yourself what the world needs, but rather what makes you come alive. For that is what the world needs, people who have come alive." And for me, this is the work that makes me come alive. There are 1,000,001 problems to solve. No matter which set of problems you devote yourself to, you are guaranteed to leave more problems unsolved when you die than solved. So if you try to start with like guilt and duty, you're never going to have rest, because it's like, okay, I'm dedicating myself to the problem of cancer, but what about domestic violence over here? Okay, I'm dedicating myself to the problem of domestic violence, but what about poverty and minority communities? Oh, okay, yeah, I'm gonna dedicate myself to that. I want them to know I'm a good guy. Yeah, but what about misinformation and mainstream media? Okay, and you're just going to be running around with no peace, trying to virtue signal in every direction. What is the set of problems that it makes you come alive to solve? And if you haven't gotten that far, that's okay. What observations in the world, in the real world, stoke your curiosity, right? Start there. And when you deal with the stuff that makes you come alive, then you'll begin to realize that is your inner compass pointing you in the direction of your gift. That's the thing that makes room for you in this world. And that's the thing that, even though you have suffering, even though you have difficulty, you have something special that makes it meaningful. And that's what meaning is. Meaning isn't about having it easy. Meaning isn't about always loving what you do. Because you ask any parent, there's a huge difference between I love X and I'm happy with X right now, right? When you wake up to, you know, a crying baby at 2 a.m, I don't know if that's passion, right? I don't know if that's following your highest excitement. You know, that's meaning, right? That's love. It's a kind of love that's anchored in something that's deeper. It's kind of like in Lord of the Rings, you know, where everybody who takes that ring, it corrupts them because it's a powerful force that can destroy you. But if you're called to be the ring bearer, you have something special that other people don't have, and you can be able to carry the burden, not because you're trying to virtue signal by carrying the burden, but because you know this is what my heart beckons me to do. When you find that work, it gives you the strength to endure the suffering. Other people on the outside looking in will say, wow, you're so courageous. Wow, you have so much endurance. And you'll just be like, nope, I'm just following my calling, you know, and we can all have that when we follow our calling. So things are going well, man. I'm just continuing to do the work and continue to do what I'm called to do, you know, one step at a time, one good deed at a time. That's all.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm satisfied. I mean, we got more time if you want to use it, but I don't want to take any more of your time than is necessary. But I don't, maybe you, I don't know if you have any questions for me, but go ahead and send me, message me the links and things that I should include here where people can find you and how they can support your work and how, because, to whatever degree my channel can give you some visibility and spread the news about what you're doing, and so that people can support you. I want to be able to do that.
Sure, I appreciate that. I do have one question for you. Let's go back to our brothers we have in common, John and Glenn. Have you had a chance to have them on your show? Have you talked to them?
No. The thing that people do is they always try and get like a bigger name on their channel, and I don't like that. I don't like that. I've had some people, and if Jordan Peterson says, Paul, I want to be on your channel, I'll have him on my channel. That's all right. But the thing is, one of the things I learned from watching my father serve the people he served is that, the riches that God has placed in this world in corners no one will ever see. Ooh. And so that's why it doesn't do anything for my YouTube algorithm to have randos on my channel, have conversations with people that will never have a YouTube channel, and nobody outside their own little immediate circle will ever know their story. Yeah. But in C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce, where, there's this parade in the middle of heaven for this woman, and C.S. Lewis is, they're the main characters, like, who's that? And it's this name that nobody knows. And, this world is full of saints that will never be recognized in this world. And so, I praise God for what Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter are doing. And if they wanted to be on my show, they're always welcome. And if they wanted me to be on their show, I don't know that I have a lot to contribute to what they're doing, because they're doing it far better than I ever could. And it's all that calling business. We're all called. And again, you said it so perfectly. And I tell my kids that all the time. I say, look, you have no idea when for a while, we didn't have a janitor at church. So my son was, cleaning up the church. And I said, you're doing a good job here. And that's, obviously I'm your father. And so, I can hold you accountable, but sometimes parents don't hold their kids accountable. But, I just let them know that I was really proud of them, because I'll tell you, whatever we call that, and there's various names for it, but whatever we call that little thing, wherever you go, that thing will be valued. And that's far more important than the degree you have or the number of people who see you. Because the truth is, if you're a boss and you have a really good worker, you don't want to talk too much about them, because, someone else might take them. But the world, we finally serve before an audience of one. And what each of us, it's fun to have acclamation and fame, but you also know that there's another side that comes with it in this world, which is criticism and critique, and the more painful criticisms and critiques are the ones that are true. But we finally serve before an audience of one. And so I want, if my channel lets a few extra people know about these saints who will not be known far beyond their own immediate circles, I'm really happy with that, because and the pleasure I get is I get a chance to know them and see them. Yeah. And my life has been, I mean, it started in a weird way. So I started making these videos about Jordan Peterson, and then I'm a pastor. So people are like, can I talk to you? And it's like, well, I'm a pastor. I should say yes. So then I talk to them, and then, you know, we'd have conversations on Zoom like you and I are having now, and the conversations would get repetitive. I thought other people could stand to listen to this. So can I record this? They'd say a lot of them, about half of them aren't, you know, appropriate to record or share because there's too much personal stuff, but a bunch of them were. And so then I thought, well, what if I post it on my channel? You know, would the world end if I do that? And I get their permission, and then people start watching this. And pretty soon everybody got the sense that, you know, I'm not alone. I've got my failures. I've got my fears. I've got my limitations, but, you know, I'm not alone. And people began finding each other and connecting with each other. And to me, that's just the job of, I said, this is what pastors do. This, you know, we bring people together. And, you know, if the church is all about the pastor, well, it's not really a church. It's just a, you know, sermon listening society. They're each other, and they get knitted together in the body of Christ, and they're all unique individuals. And so in a weird way, over the last couple of years, that's what's happened. And I'm not surprised, because I say, well, this is what Christ does. He knits his body together. I didn't plan on it. And so somebody says, talk to this guy. Okay. And look at how I've been blessed today. So I just keep doing this, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And I love that perspective about the, what's the hidden treasures in the corner quote again?
Well, it's you know, it's the pearl of great price, but it's also, well, that was from C.S. Lewis and the Great Divorce, where there's, and he even gives this woman, is Sally Smith, of some little community somewhere, you know, and I just did. So again, I've lived a weird life. So one of my good friends, when I first moved to Sacramento, a guy down the street was driving by, saw my son, he's about the same age as his youngest son, says, hey, your son want to play soccer? I thought, I'm not going to ask him. I'll say yes. Yeah, he'll play soccer. He doesn't know nothing. He's 6 years old. What does he know? He didn't even know what soccer is. So yeah, he'll play soccer. And so then, you know, you know, the guy right down the street, we became friends. And he had, you know, grown up in the black church. And then finally we're getting to know each other. So what do you do for a living? I said, I'm a pastor. He says, oh, I know pastors. Pastors are kingdom builders. They build their own kingdoms. And it's like, ooh. And he's in politics, this guy. He's a lot of people in Sacramento in politics. And so, you know, but he and I became friends, and he started coming to the church, and he started bringing his friends to the church. And in many ways, the church is alive because of him. But, and so then when his mother died a few years ago, so read The Warmth of Other Suns, because I was reading the book at the time. He asked me to do the funeral for his mother down in LA. So I went down to LA to do the funeral for his mother. But, you know, and so I looked at his life, and here's someone who grew up in a bad neighborhood in LA, and, you know, how many of the people around him didn't go anywhere, didn't get anywhere. And here's someone who, you know, eventually, you know, went to, you know, graduated from public high school, went to Occidental, got a law degree. I mean, he's far more successful than I am in so many ways. But then, you know, when his mother died, he was going to make sure. And so I felt a little embarrassed. I felt a little embarrassed giving the eulogy for his mother at the funeral, because of course they're all the politicians, and, you know, you go to a big black funeral in LA, and, you know, here's this, and people are like, why is this white guy doing the eulogy for his mother? But, you know, but here's the thing. You know, why did he made sure his mother had a good going off party, because he knew what she sacrificed for him to become the man he was. And that goes on to his children and her sacrifice. And, you know, again, I grew up watching these women in the church sacrifice and do for their sons and their daughters. And many of them got sidelined into things. And, were incarcerated or died early, or, there's heroin and AIDS and all that where I was growing up in Paterson. But so when you look at my friend, who he's a visible man and people will talk about his successes and, all of that, but it was his mother and he knows it. And so we did at his funeral. It's like, and I knew exactly, because sing her praises, because nobody might know her name.
Yeah.
But she made it happen. And it's what Jesus says, the kingdom, be of good cheer, little flock, for it's your Father's good pleasure to give you his kingdom. But, she might have gone out of this world with, pretty nice funeral. But, was she ever wealthy? And she was just one sister who went to church faithfully and, fought like crazy to make sure that her boy did not wind up like, as well as I knew, how many stories are there like that? And well, you and I might know them, but the world doesn't see them. And we see the Obamas and say, wow, but I know that before the Obamas, there were mothers and fathers and communities that sacrificed and poured into them. And in my mind, those are the heroes, and their stories are not often told. And so to the degree that I can not only help tell some of those stories and encourage others to be those individuals who maybe no one will ever know your name, and maybe you'll never be on a stage, and maybe you'll never have the gift of gab like a preacher. But I know that when we stand before the throne and God looks at their sacrifices, because again, it's always the sacrifice. When God looks at their sacrifices, and when we get to the other side, we will see that. And so, we'll get to talk to some of the big names on the other side, but I'm convinced the ones who will be heralded are many people that we've never even heard of. So, the Bible's full of that.
And it makes you wonder how much we'll really care about the big names. I mean, think about when you were in 5th grade, or think about when you were in high school. Wasn't there someone there that was just so cool, so popular? And maybe to get that person to like you would confer so much credibility on you. And then by the time you're done with college, you don't even remember that person's name. They have nothing to do with anything that you're trying to achieve in life, right? Then by the time you grow older and you get married, it's like you only keep in touch with about 2 or 3 of them. It's just a totally different game, as you grow wiser. But, you make me think about, there's this movie, I think it's, oh my gosh, the name of it is something like Mr. Magigorium Wonder Emporium. It's some weird name like that. I know I butchered it, but I think it's Johnny Depp is in there. I think Heath Ledger before he passed away. But there's a moment in there where you see like someone finds this. There's like a group of monks, and they just, all they do is they do this like chant over and over and over again. And the guy, is asking like, well, what's this all about? And the monk tells him, well, this is the chant that sustains the universe. And, like if they stopped chanting, the entire universe would dissipate. But the whole world was being held together by these guys that were just praying in some far corner of the earth that no one knew about. And while everyone's getting angry about who's going to win the Super Bowl or some terrible call that a referee made at a basketball game, it's like the work of these monks in a corner that no one will ever know about, who are keeping this whole universe together so we can even have a Super Bowl to go to, But I like your work that you're doing in this regard, because I feel like today more than ever, there's a kind of distorted relationship we have with fame and the role that it plays in the pursuit of a fulfilling life, because when you look at the pre-internet world, the pre-printing press world, the pre-automobile world, the pre-industrial world, which is still the overwhelming majority of human history, people's concept of being known was a local thing. You were known in your family, you were known in your neighborhood, you were maybe known in the marketplace. But this idea that I live in Nebraska and my life doesn't count as much if I'm not known in Chicago, that's a very recent phenomenon.
Yeah.
That did not play a role at all in ancient people's, medieval people's, like modern people's concept of happiness. And we're one of the first generations that have this ability to be discontent because we have this heightened awareness of people that grew up next to us, but who are known in New York and in California, you know, or there's someone that lives in Ireland that's known all across the United States, and we can compare ourselves to them. And so we have this idea that in order for my work to count, in order for me to have an impact, I need to have fame. And I don't think most of the Bible verses were written with fame in mind, with our contemporary idea of fame in mind. It was written from a perspective that's large enough to provide us with guidance for such a world.
Yeah.
But it certainly wasn't written in a way that prioritized this contemporary concept of fame. And I think your mission is kind of bringing us back to this ancient wisdom that says it's impact, not likes, not vanity metrics.
Yeah.
That's okay to have it, but don't keep yourself from using your voice or doing what you do just because you don't get to have a blue check mark by your name, you know?
Yeah. Well, and you know, your story, the worst thing that could have happened to you was probably to go on to the next level. Because, you know, when I message you after this, I'll let you know some of the very interesting ways that there's been some interesting intersections between you and I that I'm not going to say right now on the tape, but it's and again, so I work in a space now of a lot of apologetics, but it's kind of my own way of apologetics. It's not really like that other way, but you know, people wonder why I still believe in God and why I believe in providence. But I listen to a story like yours and I say, there's somebody's fingerprints all over this story. And he thought, yeah, I'm going to send this guy's going to trash his philosophy program. He's going to go out west and he's going to sing to all these people. He's going to get out there and he's going to lose. But the things that I am going to do with that moment and with this man's life, I'm going to do my work with this man. And again, as a Christian, there's no greater honor than we can have than to be used by God. And you know, and the story of Mary is, you know, talk about messing up somebody's life. You know, in that culture, in that context, show up pregnant when you're already betrothed to probably an older man who's going to make your future secure, and you show up pregnant and the best line you have is God did it. I mean, talk about parents coming down on you. Ain't nobody going to believe that. So, you know, and that's to me, just God is the great storyteller and we are his stories, and he loves making good ones. And I think the word that you had about, you know, gosh, I get in trouble saying that because sometimes I watch the risks people take and it's like, that's just dumb. Now moving out to LA, yeah, I can understand your parents, but that's also, you know, you're doing it in the time of life. If you had been 45 years old with 3 kids and a wife and a mortgage and say, I'm going to quit my job and we're all going to go to Hollywood and I'm going to be a star, I'd lean even heavier on you. But no, God, this is the work of God. And so it's all good. It's good.
You got time for one more question?
Oh, absolutely. I go full Joe Rogan on this channel. I mean, we take our time.
All right, I got one more for you.
Okay.
I'm curious to hear from pastors on this. I did a live stream today with my brother, who's he's the campus pastor at Roberts Wesleyan, but he's also been a pastor of other churches before. one of the things we're talking about is pastoring multicultural churches, especially at a time like this, right? Where race is the hot topic. And you know, one of the things that he has heard, and I've heard other people talking about it, you know, there are some people that they want to hear what the gospel says about these current times. And then there are others that say, look, man, just preach Jesus, just preach love. Don't bring politics into it. You know, how do you navigate? I'm curious to know how your congregation is responding to these times. One of the challenges of a pastor is that you don't get to be like, if you were like a finance guru, you could just sort of like stick to your thing. You know, you could be like, I won't even go there. I'm not even going to take that risk. I'm not even going to offend anybody. I'm just going to stick to my thing. But when you're a pastor and you have a community of people that are reacting to what's going on in the world, it's like you got to speak to it. You got to address it. And, you know, when you've got a lot of people in your congregation, I can imagine people can be pulled different ways. Why not, right? Like they're arguing everywhere else. How do you navigate the complexity of being able to speak from the heart of Christ to your church? What challenges are you facing in the way people are responding to you or to the times, and how are you dealing with it? I'm just really curious about that.
Well, I have it easy in many respects because my congregation is for the most part older, as are many congregations, and because the congregation is diverse, and because I have, in the Christian Reformed Church, we have elders and deacons. They're the office bearers. And so I talk to my office bearers and I say, hey, this is going on. You know, what do you think we should do? And I listen to them. And I was teasing one of my elders the other day because he was saying how Sacramento is a very, so I grew up in Paterson, which was very ghettoized. And, you know, black folks lived here, Italians lived here, Jews lived there, you know, so that was the New York area growing up. I moved to Grand Rapids. I lived in Grand Rapids for a while, and in some ways, race relations in Grand Rapids were even worse than Paterson. Then I moved out to Sacramento, California, and part of what, you know, in 2003, Time Magazine did a piece on my neighborhood and said, this is the most integrated city in America. And because the diversity is just crazy broad and nobody's a majority. And that has helped Sacramento. And it doesn't mean that Sacramento hasn't had its issues. When Stephon Clark was killed by the police, that wasn't too far from here. But there are in my congregation. So again, if you read The Warmth of Other Suns, there's the California aspect to that. There's the Chicago aspect, there's the East Coast aspect, and there's the California aspect. And I thought that book laid it out perfectly. But many of the older people in my congregation grew up in Louisiana and Texas and Florida during Jim Crow. And, you know, I listen to a lot of people today talking about their oppression, and I listen to them and I look at these people and whose stories I've heard. And I actually talked to, you know, a couple of the folks here at church and said, I'm going to use my channel once this COVID thing is done and I can sit down with these elders a little bit more safely. I want to get their stories out on my channel, because for years they've told me their stories about, you know, growing up in Louisiana during Jim Crow or in Texas, and this generation is passing away. But, you know, that generation, you know, fought the good fight in the South and I'm convinced they could not have done that if not for the church. The church prepared a generation to sacrifice, because that's what every good thing happens in this world through sacrifice. And so, you know, and they were led by a man who said, you know, we're going to do marches and they can take almost everything away from me, but they can't make me hate them. And, you know, the power of that message just shocked people, because we're all expecting this kind of thing. And so, and yeah, folks had to deal with the natural responses to police dogs and water hoses, and the imprison and everything that went on in that story. But it was the gospel and the church that taught these people for generations that, number one, they would suffer, but number two, they would not suffer in vain. And even if, look at Dr. King's last sermon, I've been to the mountaintop, I might not get there with you. Well, that mountaintop was how many legal successes that movement achieved. But obviously, and if you're a Christian, you understand we don't get to the mountaintop here. And that doesn't mean getting, again, all of this stuff is built into the Christian story. That, all right, I'm a Calvinist. So I had an interview with somebody, and he was like this conservative, and he was trying to make a point, and he said, like, are you a racist? And I said, yes. He's like, what do you mean? I'm a Calvinist. That means that the sin that I have, even if I struggle with it, I will never be fully free from it. But I'm saved by grace, which means that I'm not saved by virtue of achieving. The gift that has been given to me gives me the strength to wrestle against my sin, even though I keep losing, because I work out of gratitude, not out of an attempt to somehow secure something for myself. That's the basic gospel message, that we work out of gratitude. So, some people might look and say, Paul, how could you still have racism in your heart when you were raised in the church you were raised, and by the parents that you were raised, and by the work that you've done overseas and in here and in America? And I see that you've been, I got a white homeless person and a black homeless person that I deal with every day, because they seem to think that outside my door is the best place in Sacramento to camp. And so it's like all kinds of trouble for me. But no, there's still racism in my heart. There's still sexism in my heart. And but that's just the beginning of the stuff that's in there. And you might say, well, if that's true and you'll never be rid of it, well, first of all, God loves me, and so he's done this for me, so I can be motivated to not grow weary in dealing with my own sin. And those sins are not only in me, they're in my church, they're in our society. We will never get to the mountaintop in this age, but by the grace of God and with his strength, may we never get weary of climbing that mountain either. And it's both and. So my sermons are straight out of the Heidelberg Catechism. It's misery, deliverance, gratitude. And all of the good things we do in life, we do motivated by gratitude, not out of fear. Sometimes there's fear there, yeah, but ideally it's motivated by gratitude, because I see what and it's like my friend's funeral for his mother. Nobody said, well, you better give a good send-off for your mama. No, he did that send-off for her because he knew what she had suffered for him. And he was going to make sure that everybody knew who the real hero of his story was. And where did he learn that story? He learned that from his mother. And where did she learn that story? She learned that story in church. And and the part of the problem is that the zeitgeist controlled by the media has a attention span of 2 weeks. And as well as I do that right now, everybody's on TV saying, oh, because of George Floyd, things are going to be different now. And I just sit back and think, I'll believe that when I see it, because I've watched this movie a lot. And the truth is that the real change happens in the neighborhood because, again, of people like you, and people like my friend's mother, and people like my friend, and people like the elders and the deacons and the elderly saints in this church that have an understanding of walking and keep walking even when you're weary, because of what my Lord has done for me and the promise he has in store for me. So I will not labor in vain, even if in my little lifetime I never see the fruits of my labor. And this, and this is not just applicable to, America's sinful, painful history of race. It's applicable to all of our sinful, painful stuff. And so, churches have to speak to the moment. But, I often tell people, politics is now, religion is always. That's the relationship between them.
Mm.
And it's not that they're disconnected, but as well as I do, something's going to happen somewhere, and the whole national attention's going to be off this. And then something like this is going to happen again, and people are going to be like, I thought we took care of that. And it's like,
yep, that's so true. Yeah.
What kind of world do you think you're living in? And
yep.
and if you need to be, and it's not only the people, but it's often the people who don't have an understanding of what makes me think sin is going to be so easy to root out there when I struggle to root it out in here. And if I know this about myself, of course it's going to be hard out there. But at the same time, everything that you said is absolutely true. So what do? We still risk, we still try, we still go, because Christianity and the gospel is the most optimistic story you can find, because the end is already secured. And so the story of this chapter of the world has a happy ending. So, but that's true of, that's true of everything. We never go watch a movie of, here this person was born to a wonderful family and everything went great, and everything they ever asked for happened for them, and then they died. Nobody goes to that movie.
Yep. In fact, the movie doesn't even begin until you get that conflict.
That's right.
You're bored. I mean, when everybody's smiling and happy and hanging out, having a good time, it's like, okay, when's the action going to start? And it's not until like the camera zooms out and you see, somebody's watching them. Or, like the music gets all, twisted, and you're like, there's something bad getting ready to happen that they don't know about. Now we have ourselves a story.
Yeah. And so I on one hand, again, one of the things I appreciate about Lowry and McWhorter is that, in many ways, the fight that Dr. King's movement fought bore good fruit, and we can celebrate that. Absolutely. And, again, churches rehearse this all the time. Someone comes on we're celebrating a milestone. Maybe somebody got sober. Maybe someone finally married that girlfriend they were living with for too long. We all celebrate that, but we also know we celebrate the moment, but we don't rest until they put us in the ground.
Right.
And there's always a new struggle. So just like you said a few minutes ago. So, we keep doing what we're doing. I actually feel worse for, a lot of the churches that don't have much diversity in them. And that's most churches, because where are you going to turn for this? And that's what makes me so frustrated by some of the voices I hear out there. I don't know that they're being helpful. And of course, I've got my own opinions about what's helpful, and I'm certainly not always right. But so when I hear somebody and I think they're being honest on the good side and the bad side. And so let's stick with that. And this moment will pass, but let's keep doing the work that we're called to do every day.
Yeah, right on the money. That's it. The spotlight will forget about this and move on to something else. The trends will change, but the work that needs to be done it's got to happen whether the spotlight's on or not.
That's right. And what you're doing, I mean, because that's where it's at. I'm telling you, these kids are growing up and they're being disabled by how many voices around them, some of which are well-meaning but disabling. And I've seen those children have amazing potential, and they can do great things. And I mean, look at some of the heroes we have. I was listening to Chloe Valdery. She's on Twitter too, and a podcast that she did with a guy, Benjamin Boyce. And she talked about, Dr. King is a founding father of America. And she said it, and it just, a light went on for me. I thought he certainly is. And Frederick Douglass is a founding father. And a number of months ago, I was reading a biography of Frederick Douglass. And when you look at the adversity that he overcame, please don't tell me that people who are born to difficult situations can't overcome their adversities when you look at someone like him. Now, of course, the exception proves the rule, but I don't know. I've in this, with so many voices out there, in my opinion, not being terribly helpful, listening to you today inspired me and encouraged me, and took away my weariness of doing good. So yeah, God is good. God gives us these meetings for a reason, and we trust him. That's the whole point. And people like it. On my channel, I get a lot of philosophical questions. We do philosophy and that kind of stuff too, but people like, well, what pastor, what do you think a Christian is? And I say, you know what a Christian is? A Christian is someone who trusts Jesus more than they trust themselves. That's what a Christian is. And yeah, there's Trinity, and there's theology, and there's doctrine, and there's all that stuff too. But finally we come and we say, Lord, I'm just me, but I trust Jesus, and I'm going to trust Jesus more than I trust myself. And so that's what I tell my people. Let's trust Jesus more than we trust ourselves, because he is Lord and he is good. And someone who would allow himself to be brutalized and murdered and on the cross say, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. He's a man who can be trusted. He loves his enemies. And as the Apostle Paul says, while we were still his enemies, he died for us. So follow that lamb wherever he goes. That's what I tell the people.
Yeah. Word, man. Word to the wise. This is good stuff right here.
I so appreciate you. You have just, I had 3 amazing conversations today, all of which will go up on my channel. But you have so encouraged me, and please send me all those links so I can put them in the notes so people can follow up and look at the great work that you're doing. And I'm going to share this with the leadership of my church, because I want them to hear what you have to say. And I want the work that you're doing to bring hope to people who are struggling with all of what they're struggling with. So God bless you. And can I pray for you?
Absolutely.
I don't often pray on my channel because it freaks out some of the atheists, but I do it sometimes. So let me pray for you.
Yeah.
Lord, I'm so grateful for TK, and I am so grateful for the serendipitous connection that we were able to make on Twitter. And Lord, I thank you for his parents, because they obviously are servants of yours who have poured their life into this other servant of yours. And I thank you, Lord, for their wisdom and their diligence. And I thank you, Lord, for the good fruit that you have poured into his life. And Lord, I see that you have gifted him tremendously. And I am just gratified to look at the little glimpse of his giftedness that I've been able to see this afternoon. But I pray, Lord, that as he works in this very challenging and demanding field, I pray, Lord, that you give him much success. I pray, Lord, that he is able to guide and mentor and inspire and make a way for many, Lord, in the Black community that have struggled and been discouraged, and where, Lord, even well-intentioned voices are in some ways telling them that you have not given them the capacity to reach full maturity and potential. And Lord, that's a lie you have. And I pray, Lord, for the day that they got to put quotas on Asian students, because our colleges are just so filled with young Black men and women who are educated and entrepreneurial and starting new things and blazing new trails. Lord, I pray for that day, because Lord, you know, and Lord, I pray, as in the words of Jesus, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, because I believe, Lord, that in fact, the most Christian demographic in America, which is the African American community, that they may step into the leadership position that you have destined for them in this country. They have in so many ways, in many unrecognized ways, but Lord, and I pray that you would bless TK and give him a role in elevating your people and helping them to thrive. So hear my prayer, Lord, in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Hey, I really appreciate that. That is truly the first time I have ever done any kind of podcast and got prayed for at the end. That's really cool. That's the first.
Well, you have certainly blessed me, and you have encouraged me today, and you were just what the doctor ordered for me. So God is good, and but he's awfully surprising sometimes. So
Yeah.
just like you, I love your story. All right,
Hey,
so
well, thanks for making this happen.
I'm gonna post this tomorrow, and yeah, and so send me some links that you'd like me to include in the notes, and God bless you.
You got it. Take care. God bless you too.
All right, bye-bye.